Yeah. Analytics off the chain, other channels not the same. Jake and Kyle, you know the name. Headliner Nation, we running the game. I'm a headliner.
Yo, what is going on, Headliner Nation? Kyle back with the Fantasy Headliners, and we are almost to kickoff of week one, which means we will be starting our regular schedule content on Monday with our waiver wire show, with our start-sit videos for every position, rankings for every position. It is going to get crazy soon. So I said, you know what? For my final off-season video, I want to have a little fun with it. So today I've got 32 hot takes for 32 teams from a fantasy football perspective, okay? These are not rankings. These are not predictions. These aren't even things that I think will happen. They are crazy out there, some outlandish scenarios where if everything goes right or potentially wrong, these things could happen. I want to have a little fun with it. I want you all to get involved. So down in the comments, I need to know your spiciest hot takes for the season as well. Let me know what you're thinking. Some crazy potential out there scenarios that you say, hey, if this happens or that happens, this is my hot take right here. Make sure you hit the like button, subscribe if you're new here to the Fantasy Headliners, and let's dive into it. Rapid fire though, because we've got 32 teams to talk about. For the Arizona Cardinals, we're going with Kyler Murray is the overall quarterback one on the season. Why? Well, if you remember last year, he was putting up an MVP performance before he injured his shoulder. His upside with running the ball on the ground, his throwing ability, the weapons that he has there, and we'll have to see this defense. Is it going to be a strong defense? Is it going to be one that lapses at times, which causes them to throw more? If he puts all the rushing and the throwing together, there's a lot of upside there. Quarterback one overall potential. For the Atlanta Falcons, Calvin Ridley is the wide receiver one. In my rankings and projections video that I talked about the other day with runthesims.com, I talked about how Calvin Ridley, based on most projections, is looking for more receptions and more yards than Devontae Adams, but Devontae Adams is projected for more touchdowns. If Calvin Ridley can get in the end zone 12 times this season, he could be the overall wide receiver one. For Baltimore, Marquise Brown is a high-end wide receiver too. Maybe it doesn't sound that spicy, but based on what we've seen from him so far over his career, it might be kind of spicy. But he has had some very good stretches, including last year where him and Lamar Jackson finally started to connect again. Can they carry that connection over? Rashad Bateman's going to be missing for a while. You still have Sammy Watkins on the other side, which could help out. You've got Mark Andrews, still a strong run game even after the J.K. Dobbins injury. Marquise Brown goes off, making him a high wide receiver too. For Buffalo, they have two wide receiver ones this season. Who will it be? Stephon Diggs would be one, but who's going to be the other one? In a PPR format, it could be Cole Beasley. But what happens if a lot of the targets Cole Beasley has seen start to all of a sudden filter over to like a Gabriel Davis, and he scores upwards of 10 touchdowns? All of a sudden, this is a guy that's go-to every week with a bunch of big plays, and he sneaks into the very, very end because don't forget, this is a team that loves to throw the ball regardless of the situation that they're in. For the Carolina Panthers, Terrace Marshall Jr. is looking really, really good right now, and my hot take for them is he outscores both DJ Moore and Robbie Anderson. He becomes the wide receiver one on that team. He is the guy that can take the top off. He is the guy that can run the routes underneath. He is the guy that can do a little bit of everything. He becomes the wide receiver one for the Carolina Panthers. For the Chicago Bears, Andy Dalton ends up having more fantasy points than Justin Fields. That is super spicy to me. But what if Andy Dalton comes out and actually plays well? What if Matt Nagy is just as stupid as we think he is, and he doesn't put Justin Fields on the field until late this season? There is a chance that Andy Dalton outscores Justin Fields if Justin Fields doesn't get out there as soon as we all would hope, especially me. For Cincinnati, how about Tyler Boyd outscores T. Higgins and Jamar Chase? Jamar Chase having some issues right now with the dropsies. Those are going to get better. We know that. But what about T. Higgins? Maybe T. Higgins just doesn't see the type of touchdowns that we saw. Maybe him and Jamar Chase vulture each other a little bit. Maybe the offensive line doesn't take a step forward and is just as bad. Joey Burrow, not wanting to get beat up, starts to look towards the guy like Tyler Boyd, who might play in the slot the most often, gets the most targets, the most receptions, and is the wide receiver 1 on that team. This isn't really a hot take, but Nick Chubb is the running back 1 on the season. Can it happen? Probably not, because he would have to get those receptions. But what if Kareem Hunt did go down with an injury? What if something happened where Nick Chubb was getting more and more touches? What if he's already getting all of the touches on the ground? This is a team that is dominating the game flow, that they are running the ball, controlling the clock, using their strong defense and their offensive line. And Nick Chubb on the ground puts together a Derrick Henry-esque season that we've seen over the last couple of years. Kareem Hunt potentially goes down at some point in time, misses a little bit of time, and Nick Chubb takes over those receptions. For the Dallas Cowboys, Michael Gallup ends up outscoring Amari Cooper. Amari Cooper looks good right now, but we know he is a guy that has been banged up from time to time over the last few years. What if Amari Cooper misses some time? What if that ankle that has been bothering him consistently makes him sit out some games? Michael Gallup, they've said that they're moving him in the slot and outside a little bit. What if that big play connection with Dak Prescott is back? He ends up outscoring Amari Cooper if Amari Cooper can't stay healthy. For Denver, Drew Lock ends up outscoring Teddy Bridgewater. Teddy Bridgewater comes out to start the season. He just isn't getting it done. Denver says, well, we've got to go back to Drew Lock. We've got to see what we've got with him before we decide to move on next season. And they put Drew Lock back out there, and Drew Lock maximizes some of those opportunities and ends up putting more fantasy points on the board this season than Teddy Bridgewater. For Detroit, Jamal Williams outscores DeAndre Swift. For DeAndre Swift, he already has some growing issues. He has some issues being healthy to start the season. Week 1 is still in doubt right now. They ended up signing Jamal Williams for a reason. Jamal Williams is going to be a guy who's going to pound the ball on the ground. If DeAndre Swift misses time, or if he has to be limited in any certain weeks because of that, Jamal Williams is a guy that could easily outscore him if they go ahead and convert a lot of those touches over to him and they run the football as much as Dan Campbell has said that they want to. For Green Bay, well, let's go with the guy that's not a newcomer, but he is he's a returning star for the Green Bay Packers. That's going to be Randall Cobb, and he is a wide receiver 2 this season if everything goes right. Well, I mean, when a guy like Aaron Rodgers basically says, I want my guy Cobb back, I'm not putting a signature on a line, I want my guy back, they went and did it. And they went and did it for a reason. They don't have a guy who is an established number 2. They've got Amari Rodgers, Marquez Valdes-Scantling. I mean, they ended up actually releasing Devin Funchess. Devin Funchess is gone. Randall Cobb could end up seeing a bunch of those targets that went to Big Bob Tunyon last year over the middle. Now they go to Randall Cobb, and Randall Cobb finds himself in some territory that he has not been in for quite a while. For the Houston Texans, Nico Collins ends up becoming a fantasy viable start every single week. This one is difficult because the Texans are no good. They're probably not going to be any good. They're going to end up throwing it a lot, and they don't really have anybody there except Brandon Cooks. But Brandon Cooks has been for a while now 1 hit away from missing significant time. Those concussions really, really add up. He is a guy that I worry about staying on the field on a constant basis. But with Nico Collins, a big play guy, somebody that can go into the end zone and go up and get the football. What if at some point this season, with how much they throw, we look at Nico Collins and say, man, we have got to have him as a wide receiver 3 every single week. For Indianapolis, Carson Wentz starts 17 games and is a quarterback 1 on the season. We're not off to a great start right now. The injury that came up, now he's missing time on the COVID list, but gets himself healthy. He ends up getting out on the field for 17 full games this season. If he does that and they throw as much as they need to or potentially will, he gets back to some of that relevance that we saw while he was in Philadelphia and gets into the top 12 top 12 quarterbacks. For Jacksonville, they end up having 3 wide receivers inside the top 36. That's right. Shenault, Marvin Jones, and DJ Chark become fantasy viable as wide receivers 1, 2, and 3 every single week, with how much they're going to have to throw it, with Trevor Lawrence being at the helm now, and a defense that really won't be able to stop anybody. For the Kansas City Chiefs, CEH, he becomes a top 5 running back. How does that happen? We've seen it happen before. We've seen it happen with Kareem Hunt. We've seen it happen with Jamal Williams. We've seen a stretch of games where Damian Williams, when he was the guy in Kansas City, he was putting up numbers. I mean, there's guys all over the place in Kansas City that have performed when they are there. Obviously, a big disappointment last season for CEH, but that's because a lot of people are drafting him in the first round, in the front half of the first round even. And that's why he disappointed, because he just wasn't able to do that. But this is an offense that spreads the ball around, can get him touches out of the backfield, both through the air and on the ground. He steps up and in the red zone and at the goal line finally is able to punch some things home. And all of a sudden we see some of that upside that we thought that CEH had last year, except now it translates into this season. For the Las Vegas Raiders, Bryan Edwards and Henry Ruggs both become wide receiver 2s. Now, is Derek Carr going to be able to make anybody a wide receiver 1? I don't think so, because Darren Waller is still going to be there getting quite a bit. And we'll see what they do with Kenyon Drake out of the backfield and Josh Jacobs, obviously. But they end up throwing it more than enough that Bryan Edwards and Henry Ruggs both find themselves in wide receiver 2 territory. For the Los Angeles Chargers, Mike Williams ends up outscoring Keenan Allen. This one is super, super hot. But why is it hot? It's because of how good Keenan Allen is. But there's so much untapped potential with how well Mike Williams does down the field. If he can stay healthy and he can score double-digit touchdowns and see quite a bit of targets from Justin Herbert, now without his safety net and Hunter Henry that he had last year that he really targeted quite often. Yeah, Henry didn't have a great season, but he still saw quite a bit of targets. Now push those out to Mike Williams a little bit more, and he scores the touchdowns. If he outscores, or if he scores more touchdowns than Keenan Allen this year, I don't think he ends up outscoring him. That's why this is super hot, but who knows? It could end up getting close. For the Los Angeles Rams, Robert Woods is a top 5 wide receiver. How does that happen? They throw the ball a lot. Matthew Stafford locks on to Bobby Trees. He is his go-to guy. He is the guy that he looks for every single time. And all of a sudden, Robert Woods is scoring touchdowns, reaches double-digit touchdowns, over 100 targets, around 100 receptions. And now this is a guy that is a top 5 play every week. For Miami, Waddle, Fuller, Parker, they're all inside the top 36. Tua takes a step forward that a lot of you don't think he can. I love some Tua. I think he's going to take a step forward. They end up throwing the ball quite a bit because this is a much improved AFC East. A lot more competition than they saw last year. Maybe the defense, who potentially overperformed last year, comes back down to earth a little bit this year, and they really got to throw the ball more often. For Minnesota, Adam Thielen outscores Justin Jefferson. Justin Jefferson, he's been a little bit banged up, but what if Justin Jefferson comes out this year and everybody who last year looked at Adam Thielen as the wide receiver 1 now looks to Justin Jefferson, and we see Adam Thielen's volume climb again? If they say, oh, hey, we are going to put double teams on Justin Jefferson, we are going to make sure that he doesn't beat us, Adam Thielen's going to have to beat us. If they go into the games with that type of mentality and Adam Thielen scores the type of touchdowns we saw last year, he outscores Justin Jefferson. For the New England Patriots, Damien Harris ends up being a top 12 running back. Probably a little bit spicy, but not as bad as what we have seen some of these be, because now you have no more Cam Newton. So those goal line touches are gone, right? Mac Jones isn't going to be stealing any short yardage situations running the football. He's going to be handing it off to Damien Harris. And if we have any injury concerns with any of the wide receivers or the tight ends who have been a little bit banged up, if that happens and they just pound the football as much as possible, Damien Harris is going to be at the start of it. What about Troutman out in New Orleans, a popular sleeper tight end pick? Well, what if Adam Troutman ends up finishing as a top 6 tight end? Why? No Michael Thomas for a majority of the season. Marquez Callaway's looked good, but don't forget, Jameis Winston loved Cameron Brate and O.J. Howard while he was in Tampa Bay. What if he looks towards Troutman the same exact way, and he becomes a guy that's getting target after target after target? For the New York Giants, Sterling Shepard is a wide receiver 2 in half PPR or full PPR leagues. Same exact thing I said with a couple of other teams. He moves to the slot. He is the guy that Daniel Jones has to get rid of the football. He is the guy that's running those routes that are going to allow Daniel Jones to get rid of it the quickest, and he is the guy that eats it all up. Kenny Golladay having hamstring issues already. Kadarius Toney has not looked good. You've got Darius Slayton, who will play exclusively on the outside. You've got Saquon Barkley back. Saquon Barkley comes back. All of a sudden, those linebackers creep a little bit closer to the line of scrimmage, and now Sterling Shepard is going to be alone by himself over the middle. For the New York Jets, Zach Wilson has a Jameis Winston-like quarterback 1 season. I'm talking about the type of season where he puts up over 4,000 passing yards, throws for 30 touchdowns, but ends up throwing 30 interceptions as well. He said it the other day. Mistakes are going to be made. I can't be afraid of that, because if you aren't making mistakes, you aren't going for big plays. Watch out for what he does. For Jalen Hurts and the Philadelphia Eagles, we just saw him bring in Gardner Minshew. Well, for the Eagles, Minshew ends up outscoring Hurts. Hurts has a rough start to the season. He doesn't look good. The front office gets antsy because they already don't love Jalen Hurts. They set him on the bench. They go with Gardner Minshew, and the rest is written. Minshew starts the rest of the season. For Pittsburgh, Najee Harris finishes outside the top 15 running backs. It's hard to imagine that happening with all of the volume he's going to be getting. But listen up. It's not insane to think about if the offensive line is as bad as it looks. And if they have to go to a game plan where they're throwing the ball consistently, short yardage situations, quick passing attempts, things of that nature, and with the wide receivers that they have there, maybe even Najee Harris gets the volume, but he can't be efficient enough to finish inside the top 15 because he just doesn't end up getting enough touchdowns to push him in there. For San Francisco, Jimmy G ends up playing the entire season, which is probably spicy enough on his own, but he ends up being a quarterback 2 as well. How does that happen? Well, Jimmy Graham, if he plays all year, he's probably playing pretty decent. He's not an awful quarterback by any means. He's not great. He's definitely not better than Trey Lance, but Trey Lance also didn't play last season. He's got a lot of rust he's still shaking off. The game's got to slow down a little bit for him. Kyle Shanahan's going to go with Jimmy G to start. If Jimmy G's doing all right and playing well, we're not going to see Trey Lance right away. For the Seattle Seahawks, both Tyler Lockett and DK Metcalf fall outside the top 12 wide receivers. Why does that happen? Well, because they just don't commit to the passing game this year. They commit back to the running game, running the ball as much as possible, winning games with that in their defense. They go back to that mentality, and we see some of the same issues that plagued these guys at the end of last season. Both of these guys, Tyler Lockett and DK Metcalf, ended up being wide receiver 1s, but they were built largely on stretches of outstanding performances. DK Metcalf to begin the year was the wide receiver 1 for a while and then completely fell off and was really only a wide receiver 2 the rest of the season after the first 7 or 8 weeks. Tyler Lockett, his performance was really built on 3 crazy games, one of which he had 200 yards and 3 touchdowns. So because of that, there's been streaks where they just haven't played well. If it happens again, maybe these guys fall outside the top 12 wide receivers. For the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, Ronald Jones outscores both Gio Bernard and Leonard Fournette combined. That's right. We end up needing not to worry about Leonard Fournette, not to worry about Gio Bernard, and Ronald Jones ends up absolutely dominating the backfield touches. We see some of those big time touches that we got last season, some of those explosive plays, and he comes out and just dominates the backfield this season. For the Tennessee Titans, A.J. Brown ends up finishing lower than Julio Jones in fantasy points. I can't imagine that happening, but what if? What if teams are like, Julio's washed up, we got to pay more attention to A.J. Brown. All of a sudden, Julio Jones ends up taking a bunch of touchdowns. Maybe A.J. Brown does get some more targets. They're pretty even, maybe in receptions and yards, but then Julio outscores him in terms of touchdowns, and now A.J. Brown falls slightly below him on the season. And to finish it up, for the Washington football team, Antonio Gibson is a top 5 running back. People are still talking about J.D. McKissick. I've got no interest in J.D. McKissick. This is not Alex Smith. He is not going to be dumping it off to his running backs consistently. These will be design plays out of the backfield for passing situations, and they want Antonio Gibson out there as much as possible. That is where Antonio Gibson's ceiling could come in. He scores. He's got a nose for the end zone. We saw it last year. He scores, he scores, he scores, he scores. He does the same thing this year, and he gets the receptions out of the backfield, and he puts up 1,000 yards out of the backfield with Ryan Fitzpatrick slinging it all over the place, opening up holes on the ground. Antonio Gibson walks his way into the top 5. There you have it, ladies and gentlemen. Some spicy hot takes, going quickly, going fast, letting it flow through all 32 teams. Do me a favor in the comments below. Leave me your spiciest take for this season, or let me know which one of these hot takes may end up being the easiest to come true. Let me know down in the comments. If you're new here, hit that subscribe button. If you appreciate the content, then as always, hit the like. Ladies and gentlemen, we're closing in on kickoff. Don't forget, Saturday night is the Fantasy Headliners Live every Saturday at 9 p.m. right here on YouTube. Get ready for some great live shows this season. I'm out. Stay safe. Stay healthy. I'll catch you on the next episode of the Fantasy Headliners.
I'm a headliner. I'm a headliner.